Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today I'm very honoured to speak with Mick Hagen. He is the CEO and founder of a very exciting enterprise, or startup rather, and that is Mainframe. So Mick, thank you very much for being on the channel today.
Thanks for having me. This is a special occasion. I'm honored to be invited.
Not a problem, and I'm also very honoured because Mainframe does have a very good reputation, and today we're going to find out exactly why. So Mick, obviously your slogan, it stands for Mainframe being a fully decentralized and unstoppable communication network. Now, obviously decentralized is key given that you are utilising blockchain as a technology, but clearly, you and the hot seat as the CEO need to have key experience and expertise. So tell us about yourself, mate. You've done some pretty impressive things. The first is Princeton. Yes, you're a dropout, but so are many key leaders in this space around the world. So tell us more about what you've done.
Yeah, so as you said, I went to Princeton, I dropped out. I started a company called Zinch. It was the education space. It was a website that connected high school students with university admissions officers. And at the heart of it was connection. It was communication. It was helping facilitate those relationships. Worked on that for about 6 years. We had 80 employees, 10 million revenue run rate. And then we were acquired by Chegg, which is now a public company in the US.
Right.
And so that was a great experience. It was successful, but then the project that I worked on after was called Undrip. And so not all of my projects are successful. This one specifically was in the content discovery space. I wanted to build a mobile app. I wanted to learn mobile development. And so this was essentially connecting your Twitter, your Facebook, all your social media into kind of one feed. And we used algorithms to try to surface the most interesting content.
Right.
And ultimately, it was just a hard business. We didn't have a huge audience, so we couldn't run advertising, and it just wasn't sustainable. But then basically when that failed, that's when I really started to think about, okay, what can I do that can try to change the world? We started to think about email. We started building an email application actually. And that's when we became very frustrated with IMAP and SMTP, the underlying protocols behind email. And essentially that's what led us to saying, you know what, we want to build better decentralized messaging protocols. This was 5 years ago. And we weren't even thinking about blockchain. I mean, so after my first company was acquired, I invested in Bitcoin in 2013.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my first exposure just to this space. But it was mostly just out of speculation. It was mostly just like I was angel investing. I was doing all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
But anyway, we started working on decentralized messaging protocols. And one of the big challenges that we faced was that there was no economic incentive for people to support the network, to host their own mainframe servers or mainframe nodes. And so everybody was relying on us. So while the protocols were decentralized, in practice it was centralized because everybody was relying on us to kind of host to the messaging. And that's what led us to kind of then blockchain technology. We brought on some new people. Our CTO, for example, he was an early Bitcoin miner. He was part of the Ethereum community in London when he was living there. He invested in the Ethereum pre-sale. And so he's very experienced, a lot more experienced in terms of the technology for almost a decade. And then since then, we've brought on a lot of other people who have a lot of experience with blockchain technology. But for me, my first exposure was 2013. Been thinking about decentralized protocols for a long time, and did a lot more investing kind of the end of 2016, early 2017 in a lot of different projects as well. I mean, I love entrepreneurship. I love startups. I love supporting other founders.
Sure.
And so
well,
one of the great things, so let's, sorry to,
that's
sorry
fine.
That's
fine. I'm going to recap this a little bit just to facilitate those who don't know exactly what you've achieved, because that really was the crux of it, Mick. Now, you've been a founder for many different companies, including Zinc, Undrip, as you said, but also you've had key speaking roles with TechCrunch and others I've actually seen you present with. So, you know, that's a really key asset that you bring to the table. And more importantly, you've had success in many founding roles. And I suppose coupled with that, you had the benefit of failings to bring you more of that robust understanding of how to really build out a successful company. So obviously we've had a bit of a recap and from yourself, and also just from that quick recount of your achievements. But Mick, the real crux is to try and understand more about Mainframe itself. So if perhaps someone arrived in the street and they saw you and said, you know, in a nutshell, how would you explain Mainframe? What would you say to them to really inject a clear understanding?
Yeah, so what we're building is a decentralized communications network, right? And so it's censorship resistant, it's surveillance resistant. You know, we've been, like, as I mentioned earlier, we've been thinking about messaging and communication for many years. And we've always wanted to build something that was completely unstoppable. And that's essentially what we're building right now is the infrastructure. It's the network. It's a peer-to-peer network. And we're leveraging blockchain technology specifically for the incentivization. And so it has encryption, it has dark routing. Dark routing essentially creates an added layer of privacy and security where any observer of the network would not be able to see who's speaking with who. It has incentivization and decentralization. And so those are sort of the key pillars of this network. It's a peer-to-peer network. And communication and messaging is kind of the focus. But at the end of the day, it's just data packets. And so the common use case that we talk about a lot and the one that we have a lot of experience with is messaging and communication. But there are so many other interesting applications that could be built on our network. Video, audio, you can imagine a decentralized Twitter or a decentralized Reddit or a decentralized Medium. Social network. A lot of interesting use cases could be built on top of our network. And these are dApps that would be censorship resistant and surveillance resistant.
I see. So clearly you have huge ambitions to really bring communications to the fore in a multitude of ways. But let's explore some of the precepts or the pre-existing or the premise that really set you apart, and that is essentially Spatch. Many people would not know about that and why that led you into this space. So give us a Spatch shot rather than a snapshot of really what led you to become Mainframe.
Yeah, so Spatch was the original idea when we were working on better email. Right. And so we built this application, and the main idea behind the application that we built was when you're sending an email, we should be able to add more structure to that email. When you're sending an email, you should be able to say, okay, this is going to be a task. It's for Brad. Yep. I need it done by next Tuesday, and here's a bunch of details about it, right? And that was the idea behind Spatch, was to create more structure in email. Okay. And that's what led us to being super frustrated with email. So we said, you know what, let's tear out the guts. Let's rework the underlying protocols. And so essentially a lot of this led to, let's build protocols that are decentralized like email, more structured, more modern, and allow for more interoperability, more extensibility. Because the inbox, if we think about the email inbox, it's kind of like a database. You're storing information in there. Others can store information there. But it's a terrible database. It's unstructured. It's not interoperable with other applications, and it's not extensible. You can't leverage that data in any meaningful way. So that's really those were the kernels. Those were the seeds of our ideas of building better decentralized protocols.
Okay, so you're taking essentially that message system to the next level, and obviously the broader communication network itself. So let's explore why in terms of problems, because clearly you foresaw problems in the marketplace, both in the decentralized space and the centralized one. So talk us through that. What was your thinking in terms of what you really wanted to redress?
Yeah, and this is a great question. I mean, I would say there's kind of two angles that we can take this. The first is probably the more headline grabbing angle, which is we want to create a network that is simply unstoppable, that you and I and anybody anywhere in the world can communicate with freedom and with privacy and without being censored, without being surveilled, right? And so, whether that's facilitating in the next Arab Spring, whether that's helping, there were people in the Catalonian resistance, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, not that long ago, but they were using our technology because they didn't want to be censored by the Spanish government. I see. So it could be political dissidence. So there's sort of this, giving people the ability to communicate freely is powerful, and that's exciting. But another important angle to all of this, and this is probably where we have a lot more experience, is businesses and enterprises and governments and institutions that simply need security. They need privacy. They don't want to be hacked. They don't want to be compromised. They don't want to have data leaks. They don't want some adversary to penetrate their network and take all their trade secrets. And so there's a huge, huge amount of value for these bigger institutions like enterprise companies, for example, businesses, governments, and we're working with a lot of these. We haven't announced them yet. We will soon.
I will ask as well, don't worry.
Because they need that extra level of privacy. A lot of these businesses and these enterprises, for whatever reason, they're not going to trust Google. They're not going to trust Microsoft. They're not going to trust Facebook. And so they need some control. They need control of their data. They need flexibility around how the application works. Sure. And so Mainframe, it creates a network that gives them that flexibility. It gives them that control while also building on a network that allows for more resilience and more unstoppability.
Okay, so obviously you've really thought out those key components of enterprise, and also that ideal of access whereby people can have the control of their information, control of the fluidity and flow as well through this communication network. So that would be appealing to both parties. It is important, I think, to discuss this aspect of enterprise a bit further with regard to permissioned and permissionlessness, because we're hearing that being thrown around a lot. What are the advantages of having some of these closed designs inside this ideal model of distribution and decentralization?
Yeah, so each enterprise is a little bit different. I mean, we're talking to enterprises who, due to regulation, due to compliance, they need to be able to have access to the records of their employees.
Right.
And that's okay, whether it's financial institutions, et cetera. And so essentially the way it would work is you would have kind of a private network inside of that enterprise. And anytime that they want to communicate with somebody outside that network using mainframe, using the mainframe infrastructure, there would be kind of this bridge out to the public mainframe network.
Okay.
So that you can imagine that a cluster of their own nodes where kind of internal communication and internal usage they can be using, and there could be kind of an admin or some sort of master private key to have access if they need it, right? If it's kind of an industry that requires that for compliance. But anytime they want to bridge to the outside public mainframe network, they could still do that. So it just depends on the use case. It depends on the industry. But those are a few examples.
And Mick, in this respect, let's say you have 5 CEOs in the room and you're pitching to encourage them to utilize your service. What is the key advantage in doing so as opposed to using current systems right now that do allow them to interact in the wider sphere?
So I think at the highest level, it's kind of that added layer of security and added layer of privacy. Now, if we drill down a little bit deeper, we communicate that because it's decentralized, right? Because it's not just distributed, it's not just on servers that they kind of own, but because it's completely decentralized, it creates a more resilient and more unstoppable network. And so again, like governments would be a perfect example where, governments have adversaries, they've got people, spies, they have people trying to get information from governments. Right. They have people trying to do denial of service attacks, essentially just trying to disrupt and attack communication. And we have a lot of these conversations with government officials, and having a network that's simply just more resilient. It has encryption, right? It has this dark routing, which means it's harder to see who's speaking with who. This is a layer of privacy and security that is just unprecedented.
I see.
And so really, at the high level, it is around privacy and security. It's just they can't get it anywhere else.
Well, where were you when Cambridge Analytica came out? Where were you then? So let's talk about now Utah, for example, in terms of relocation. Clearly, you have your own space, a new space. How important has this relocation been to your, evolution, iteration as, a burgeoning company that's trying to really become known in the space?
Yeah, so this space that we've been working from for the last couple of weeks is actually a venture capital firm. Like, it's one of our investors. And they're like, hey, why don't you guys just use our space until you kind of get settled? So we're still looking for our own office. But listen, we're a scrappy, frugal, thrifty startup. We're not going to get some fancy-dancy VC space like this. We're used to working from kind of closets, right? Like we're scrappy. But in terms of the transition, I've lived in London the last 4 years. It's a great community, great city. But this is kind of a new chapter for us. And I think I grew up in Utah. I love Utah. I have a lot of networks and contacts here. And so just as we think about building the company and growing the team, this is a place that is full of great talent, hard workers. We feel like we can have a good quality of life here. It's not crazy expensive like London or San Francisco. Right. And we think that we can really be one of the more prominent blockchain companies here in Utah. And we think we'll be able to kind of be a vacuum for attracting the best talent here of engineers and business people who are interested in blockchain technology. So we kind of saw it as an opportunity to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. But the beauty of blockchain and kind of this industry is you can be anywhere in the world and you can build amazing technology. So hopefully it's no problem that we're in Utah.
Right, and I think that's the point I was wanting to make, is that you have all those connections and can do it from any location in the world, and obviously you have reasons given your background. Now, if we could take it one step further with regard to, unpacking Mainframe more specifically, and that's with regard to key value. So once again, if someone did ask you to express one key value point for Mainframe, you had to choose one, what would it be? And why?
it's a network that is simply unstoppable, right? When we compare kind of the mainframe infrastructure with maybe other different various messaging platforms or apps and whatnot. And remember, we're not an app, but a lot of people ask like, well, what about Telegram or what about Signal?
That's
the big difference.
That's where we're going with this.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. So with a lot of these applications, they do offer encryption, which is good. And I think encryption is starting to become kind of table stakes. Like if you're a messaging tool, encryption just has to be built in. I think people are expecting that and wanting that.
Absolutely.
But a lot of these, I mean, a fundamental difference is a lot of these messaging tools are centralized, right? They're controlled, owned, and centralized in every sense of the word, right? So it's easier to attack. It's easier to disrupt. Right? Slack went down. It's like all of a sudden everybody is unproductive for a couple hours at work, right? Like it's not resilient. It's not unstoppable. So they're centralized. I think there are some tools that are decentralized, right? Like maybe XMPP or Matrix or IMAP, SMTP. There are some decentralized protocols which we use every day in email. But the problem is they don't have incentivization, which means there's no economic incentive for a lot of people all over the world to be supporting this network. And so if Google goes down, that's too bad. You can't get your email, right? That's just the reality that we live. So Mainframe is not only decentralized, it's incentivized. Yes, it has encryption. And let me tell you about dark routing. And I think
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that later. So okay. Just hold on with that one. But I wanted to talk to you more now. You've made it very clear about the competitors in a centralized context. But let's now talk about those in a decentralized context as well that are now emerging. So we have Scrumble as one example. Let's explore that in terms of why you still are set apart, arguably, in the decentralized space as a technology.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is I don't focus a whole lot on competitors. I don't focus a whole lot on what other people are doing. I focus on what we're doing, our team, and solving problems that our customers or potential customers have. So Scrumble specifically, I remember there was some chatter around, they did like a table of like what difference and Mainframe. And one of the things that they said is that Mainframe doesn't do video or audio. And I told them, I tweeted them, I'm like, actually, this Mainframe is a peer-to-peer network that is just data packets, right? We're moving data packets around. So though we talk a lot about communication and messaging, there's no reason why audio, voice or video cannot work. So again, I don't know all the details of what Scrumble is doing. To me, it looks like it's a failed startup that's kind of pivoting, but I don't know. Who am I to say? I have no idea.
So essentially, sure. So essentially, your argument is two things. One is that you're not concerned about your competitors, and arguably, B is that your argument is that there's space in the game for it anyway, because we're in such a nascent period of time in this industry of communications in a decentralized situation, and no doubt you're focused only on what you're doing as a team.
Yeah, I just don't stress too much about it. I agree. This is such a nascent space. The reality is we should all be supporting each other. There's plenty of opportunity for all of us. But I think I would put my team against any team out there all day, every day, right? Like this is a team that knows how to execute. We know how to win. And so I'm not too stressed out about anybody else.
Well, Mick, let's talk about that because it was for later, but perfect segue. Why is your team so good? What are the skill sets? What's the expertise that they bring to the table in the boardroom? And why are you so confident that they can lead the way?
Yeah, let me just share. I mean, I'm not going to go through every employee, but let me just share a few that could help the discussion, right? So we already talked a little bit about our CTO, right? He was a Bitcoin miner, part of the Ethereum community, participated in the pre-sale. He was basically retired, but he was so excited about what we were doing that he joined us as the CTO. So there's Carl. Carl's amazing and super talented. We've got engineers that have worked with some of the top startups in Europe. We were in London, we were based there, PhDs in distributed systems, cryptography, you name it, right? We've got great engineering talent. Now let's move on to kind of business and marketing. I mean, Austin Craig, when he got married, I think this was like 5 years ago, he did a documentary called Life on Bitcoin. He and his wife lived on Bitcoin for 3 months, right? Traveling all over the world, living on Bitcoin. So this is somebody who's been entrenched in the space for a very long time, understands it, understands how to communicate it, et cetera. Brad and Matt, I mean, these are some of the best business, strategy mind. I mean, Matt was with Xamarin, which was acquired by Microsoft, has worked a lot with kind of business development with developers. Brad has led sales teams, has led business development teams. Kaylin, well, actually, I'm going to break some news right here.
Okay,
I'm going to break some news right here, though.
Please do.
And we haven't announced this yet.
Okay. So you're hearing it from Mick, right? The CEO.
Yes.
Here is some breaking news for Mainframe.
I'm not going to give all the details yet, but I will say this. We just brought on somebody who's going to lead product. He is a successful entrepreneur, one of the most successful entrepreneurs here in Utah. He sold his company for a lot of money. He's done a lot in education and teaching. And really what he's going to do is lead product. He spent a lot of time with developers. He understands their needs. And Mainframe, at the end of the day, it's a platform to help developers build rich, decentralized applications.
Right.
And so I'm not going to say his name because we're going to announce it, but he's another example. Like, we're building a team that is just solid, not just on engineering, but on marketing, on business development, on community. Like, it's just solid.
Right. Well, we hear your passion, we hear excitement, and we hear your confidence as well. Clearly, you see all these facets are covered by the Mainframe Diamonds. So thank you for your clear, explanation of why your team is so valuable. Obviously, Mick, this is a really big deal for you as Mainframe. You have 5 components that really add value in a multitude of ways. But for the layperson, perhaps they don't know. So why are each of these such important assets, once again, and key facets of the Mainframe structure?
Yeah, I mean, let's do dark routing because that's the one that I'm most excited about, okay. Right? So the way that dark routing works, for anybody who hasn't read our white paper, hasn't read our website, you can imagine that you're sending mail to somebody, like actual handwritten mail, postal mail. Right. And usually you've got to put the door number, the street address, the zip code, the city, the state, everything, right? And then you know that that's going to get to the person. With dark routing, the innovation here is that you no longer need to put the door number and the street number or the zip code. You could just put the city. So you're going to write a letter and you're going to put Chicago, Illinois, and you send that off. And what's going to happen when it gets to that area, so it's going to take the most efficient route to Chicago. But when it gets to Chicago, it's going to go to every single door, every single home in that entire area. And only the door who actually has the private keys, who can decrypt it, will be able to read the message. But that message is going to go to every single door there. And so the benefit of that, now you don't want to use that every single time. Maybe you only want to use that for conversations that you want more private. But the benefit of that is if anybody's watching that mail, they're not going to know who it's going to.
Right.
Anybody who's kind of wanting to glean metadata, this is the whole Edward Snowden stuff where it's like the government they couldn't always read the messages, but they could get metadata. They could see who was speaking with who. And that's still information. That's surveillance. Sure. And so with dark routing, essentially, anybody who's observing the network, when it gets to kind of that area, and you can kind of toggle, it's a spectrum. It's called luminosity. Right. You could just say planet Earth, and then it goes to every single door on planet Earth. It might take a while, but it could. And so anybody who's watching the network essentially would not be able to see who you're communicating with. And the benefit of that is then they can't disrupt it. They can't do a denial of service attack. They can't stop it, right? They might not know what you're talking about, but they don't like that you're talking. And so essentially now they wouldn't be able to stop it because they don't know who you're talking to. Sure. So that's dark routing.
Right. So clearly you're freeing up the space for people to have peace of mind that their information is going to go to the right recipient. And not be compromised in any way with these end-to-end encryption measures. Okay, so let's now talk about your peer-to-peer architecture. That's very important because obviously that's the premise for decentralization itself.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially we've got nodes on the network. We don't have a server. It's not centralized. Essentially, it's just these nodes that are running the network. And we've got a bunch of different services that essentially allow these rich applications to run and to be decentralized, right? We've got kind of computation, which is to run operations. We've got data services, which is, when you're a developer, you need to be able to kind of organize structured data. So you can almost think of this as like a decentralized database. So we're looking to partner with projects like BlueZell or Wolk, et cetera. And then you've got file storage, and you need to be able to save bits of data in a decentralized way. And so initially we're leveraging Swarm, which is Ethereum's kind of main file storage solution. Right. But that's not to say we couldn't also work with IPFS, Filecoin, et cetera. And maybe in the time where a lot of these technologies are not fully mature or fully ready for prime time, you could imagine that a centralized solution could kind of fit in. If somebody feels more comfortable using an AWS or a Dropbox or some other kind of centralized solution, just while some of this other technology matures. Because the reality is not all of these decentralized technologies, computation, data services, file storage, not all of them. In fact, very few of them are ready for prime time, production ready, enterprise scale, use cases.
And you raise a good point as well, because in a sense, there's a degree of agnosticism in this, in that you are agnostic in terms of your application, because you could apply even effectively in a centralized capacity, but no doubt your focus is on these decentralized storage facilities like BlueZell, as you mentioned.
Exactly.
So that's,
I think one of the misconceptions that I think a lot of people have about our project, and I think this is probably it's our own fault, and we're going to continue to improve this, is a lot of the focus is on just like messaging and communication. But at the end of the day, our vision is to build a platform in which messaging applications could be one application that's built on it, but there could be a lot of other applications that I said. Like I said, video, voice, there could be a decentralized Reddit or a decentralized Twitter, etc. Right. And I mentioned some of those because sometimes those are subject to censorship. But there's we want to build a platform that makes it super easy for developers to build rich decentralized applications that are censorship resistant and surveillance resistant. Ideally, the developer doesn't know about blockchain technology. They use our SDKs, they use our APIs, they use our platform, and they're able to build these rich decentralized apps.
Right. Well, you heard it from Mick. Clearly, the fundamental point of Mainframe is that they are building out a platform. And from there, we're going to see many different applications emerge. And the first one, no doubt, is the focus of messaging systems and communication networks, moreover.
You got that right.
So let's now talk about incentivization. That's a pretty big thing in terms of, you afford people value. So how do you do that in terms of really the rewards mechanism built in?
Listen, you are well prepared for this interview. Good for you. Good questions. Well, I like getting into the nitty gritty.
Well, let's talk swap, swear, and swindle. Let's get really clear.
Wow, this is good. This is good stuff. Okay, look, so the way that incentivization works on Mainframe, to keep it simple, and we can drill into the specific protocols in a second. Sure. We have a network of nodes, and essentially they're rewarded and incentivized to keep the network running. So if you're sending a message, sending packets across the network, a node is paid in Mainframe tokens to relay that message, to essentially keep that message going, to pass it on to the next node.
Right.
And sometimes the recipient node's not online. So we have this thing called delegate nodes, where essentially you can delegate a node to hold on to that data until you get back online. So Mainframe nodes are rewarded and incentivized to relay data, to store data, and to deliver data. And that's kind of the simplistic way of describing how a Mainframe token works and why it's essential to incentivize and to kind of keep this network running.
I see. So clearly that you want to keep that ecosystem fluid and functional at all times, and this is what it does. Now let's talk about interoperability as well, Mick, because that is an absolute fundamental for really, as you use the analogy of nodes, this is the glue. This is what brings them all together and light them up. So how are you going to light up the system, and why is it important?
Yeah, this is so many of these things are just so exciting to me. So interoperability, it means that we are not tied down to a specific blockchain, right? Right now we're using an ERC20 token for incentivization. That's not to say we can't use other tokens in the future, but the point is, if you are building on Tezos or EOS or some other blockchain, you could still use the Mainframe network because it's its own standalone peer-to-peer network, and we're building SDKs for all of these blockchains. We're going to make, Neo invested in us. So I'm breaking news right here. This is special. Anybody who's got to this point of the interview, you deserve some breaking news.
You do.
Neo invested in us, right? So we're going to partner with Neo. We're going to partner with all these different blockchains. And the point is, I got
to stop you there because that's really exciting, because a platform invests in a platform. Here we have a communications platform, and we can see many different serious platforms already existent as blockchain startups that see the value in you. These aren't small platforms by any means either. They have significant enterprises already appending to their system. So congratulations for that, and please continue on because that is exciting.
Yeah, so essentially, a dApp developer who's building on any of these blockchains, via the SDKs that we're making sure that they can use, will be able to connect to the Mainframe network. And so you can imagine, and this is really cool, you can imagine that a dApp on the Neo blockchain wants to communicate with a dApp on the Ethereum blockchain, and the Mainframe network can be that bridge and can facilitate that communication. And so again, it's completely interoperable. It's its own standalone network. Unstoppable.
That is really exciting. I mean, you talk about unstoppable, but also, without trying to be a pitch for yourself, clearly you're not just about that platform, and that interoperability allows for you to have potentially infinite number of blockchain platforms to really utilize your service. You aren't beholden to any of them, and you're not certainly skewed to, ERC20 and Ethereum by any means. It's just a starting point.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
So currently, we're talking about different platforms. Can you give us some names of others you're considering?
Yeah, I mean, it's considering building SDKs for.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious ones are Ethereum, Neo, Tezos, EOS. Trying to think. I mean, there are a few others that we're talking to that we're looking at. I mean, we want to be where the developers are. And so if there's a community of developers that are starting to build interesting things on some new blockchain, we're going to make it really easy for them to connect to the Mainframe network.
Right. Well, your scope is obviously very far-reaching, to say the least, given that you essentially are so interoperable. If we can now talk about your final aspect of your 5 elements, because we've covered everything else, and that is your end-to-end encryption. Now we have explored it already, but why is it that this end-to-end encryption is so important in the decentralized context?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is, like I said, I think end-to-end encryption is becoming table stakes for a lot of these communication platforms and tools. I mean, this is just kind of, public-private key cryptography, where only the right person who has those private keys can decrypt that message and read it. Sure. And this is just, I mean, this is essential. This is essential to having a secure network and a private network, so that the network can run and that it can do what we say it's going to do.
Sure. So that's your core asset, obviously, because people can rest assured that you have a very, very secure system that people can essentially pass your information on and trust you in a trustless capacity via the blockchain. So in terms of engineering as well, can you tell us some key updates that have been happening, because you have posted them? For example, you've had summit meetings, you've had various testing going on. What can you tell us, just as a summary of some of your updates in that space?
To summarize it, we are 100% laser focused on working with developers, and developers in the sense of not just like a one-off weekend warrior who's building an interesting application, but also enterprises and governments and institutions and solving for real use cases. Now, while we appreciate CryptoKitties and while we think that that's cool and interesting and entertaining, we want to build real technology that solves real use cases, real problems. And so we are 100% laser focused on leveraging blockchain technology to build for solving real problems.
And people want to hear that too, because we want to see how you're not just an ideal for the blockchain, but you're actually a real use case for business. And we're going to explore that later. But if we could now talk about your tokens as well, Mick, because clearly not just the token, but the function, the purpose. Can you explain to us firstly why you need to have a token? Why is this an imperative for your overall ecosystem? And secondly, can you tell us a bit about the details of your ICO and where you're at this point?
Yeah, so we touched on it a little bit earlier, but essentially the Mainframe token is used to incentivize and reward nodes for running this network and relaying messages, delivering messages, storing messages. And the reason why it's essential that we have our own token is, and I usually when I talk about this, I have a graph, but essentially we want to reward the people who are in the community to help kickstart it, right? Tokens are a beautiful incentive mechanism to help kickstart a nascent early community. And so if we were to use some other token that is not necessarily tied to our community, then it wouldn't have the same incentive structure. Like people would be investing their time and energy and resources into our community because they know that incentive to get the Mainframe token is directly correlated to their efforts and energy and the community that we're building together. And so that's why that's why there needs to be incentivization, and that's why we need our specific token that's designed specifically for this community. Okay,
so clearly you want that to be specific. Now, in terms of utility, is it defined as a utility token specifically?
Yes,
in the context
100%.
Okay, and that's important.
100%.
Obviously, in the context of SEC, with the drama of securities and these pseudo utilities, you've heard it from the boss. It is a utility. Now let's explore.
Yes, I mean let me just say one thing about this.
Right.
This is as utility as it gets. To use the Mainframe network, to send data across the network, you have to use mainframe tokens. Now, some people might be like, oh, I have to pay to send a message. Every message I send, yes, you do. But it's not going to be 1 cent. It's not going to be 5 cents. It's going to be 0.00001 cent. Okay, like you have to pay, but it's really negligible on a kind of per message basis. But yes, to use the network, you've got to pay mainframe tokens. It's like Ethereum. You want to send a transaction on Ethereum, you got to pay gas. And that gas is used to pay for the nodes to, et cetera, et cetera. So same idea. This is as utility as it gets.
I see. So the token is the fuel that keeps the whole network running, and people who want to participate, they have to ensure they use that to ensure that it remains robust and continues. So with regard to your ICO as well, Mick, no doubt you're in the process phase of the iterations of the ICO. So I don't want to bore the community with things that have already happened, but tell us where we're at with the ICO and how we're going.
So because we're a U.S. company, U.S. citizens based in the U.S., there's a lot of regulatory concerns about doing a public crowd sale.
Right.
And so we're not doing a public ICO, a public crowd sale. As much as we would have loved to do that, we don't want to jeopardize the project.
Okay.
And so what we did is we did a pre-sale with accredited investors only. Now, we weren't just splashing allocations everywhere and anywhere. We wanted to give it to the people who could add the most value.
Right.
The people who could be strategic with community, with marketing, with hiring, with company building, business development, et cetera. So that's who we gave the pre-sale allocation to.
Right.
And we did not give them any crazy big bonuses. Like everybody was like right in there, just like the same price. There was tranche 1 and tranche 2, 10% price difference, 10%, not a massive difference.
So essentially, just to jump in there, you did your homework, is what you're saying, and you ensured that you minimize the risk of pump and dump, and those who are trying to capitalize simply on the price value in the early entry point, as opposed to those who actually have value add positions for the long term.
Yes. And not only that, but we limited allocation. We didn't give anybody more than, I think like 1,000 Ether allocation. Right? Some of them wanted 10,000 Ether.
Sure. And we're talking about those who have, who are capital firms. We're talking about those who have significant interest, not individuals in that case.
Yeah, we're talking about funds. So there were basically two groups of investors in our pre-sale, or participants, pre-sale participants. Sure. One was like funds, right? Like VC funds, crypto funds, like proper funds. And the others, well, actually there was 3 categories. The first were funds. The second were founders. One of the things that I'm most excited about in terms of like the combination of participants, there were a lot of founders, like prominent blockchain founders invested in our project. So that's really exciting. And then the third were people who could help with marketing and help with media, Twitter personalities, YouTubers, things like that. So those were kind of the 3 classes of pre-sale participants. Right. And each of those, we believed, we wouldn't have given them allocation unless we believed they could add some value to the project.
Sure, and I also want to jump in there and, I guess, illuminate the reality that you're not paying them. That's important. They are choosing to invest and support in your functionality, in your utility as you evolve in a business. And I also would like to, congratulate you for your transparency, quite sincerely, and without any lip service, because we don't hear enough of this from CEOs, quite simply, in terms of exactly what your intentions were with your pre-sale. So let's move on now and talk about what the next phase of this plan is, Mick.
Yeah. So pre-sale is done. Yeah. But we knew we couldn't do a crowd sale, but we wanted the community. We cannot do this without the community. So what we decided to do was a crowd gift. We decided to give more than $3 million away in mainframe tokens to the community. Now, this is unprecedented. This sort of giveaway has never been done before, and there are 3 phases of this. Okay. One was proof of being, and this was phase 1, and essentially what it is airdrops, but not your typical airdrops. These were real, physical, literal airdrops. We were going to 25 cities all over the world. We've already done 5 in Asia. We're doing New York next Tuesday. And essentially we put tokens. I wish I had a token here with me. We put tokens and balloons on the ceiling. So we did a meetup, a physical meetup. You had to be there, proof of being. And we did speeches, had a fun meetup, social food, etc., hang out, music. And the balloons dropped. People would pop the balloons to get the token. And then on their way out, when they leave, they would get a QR code to get actual ERC20 tokens. But we did physical, real airdrops in phase 1. Again, this has never been done before. Right. We like to be creative. We like to think differently. So that's phase 1. And we've got 20 more cities that we're going to be doing over the next few months.
Wow, that's exciting. So 20 more cities. You're also really focused on core distribution, effective distribution, by making sure that those in the space who ultimately are going to be using you can access your utility.
Exactly. And some people were like, well, I don't live in any of those cities. I'm far away. We get that. That's fine. So phase 2 was, why does Mainframe and its mission matter to you?
Okay.
Now, we're asking you to promote things. We just wanted you to answer that question. People made videos, songs, they made cakes, crossword puzzles, comics, all sorts of interesting stuff. And we're actually going through all those submissions right now because it's a contest, and we're going to give Mainframe tokens to the people who we think clearly and authentically are believers in the mission of privacy and freedom. So that's phase 2. Phase 3, and here's phase 3. And this is one of the things that I feel proud about. There's a lot of greed and speculation and people trying to get rich quick in this whole industry. Now, we're long-term believers in blockchain technology. It's going to disrupt many industries. It's exciting. It's powerful. So we're going to try to channel a lot of that less than savory behavior and attitude. And we're going to try to channel that into something really good. And essentially, it's a contest to see who can raise the most money for a few nonprofits that we've selected. Like Amnesty International, Freedom of the Press, Edward Snowden, like a bunch of nonprofit organizations that align with our values of freedom and privacy.
Okay, so basically, you're bringing benevolence to the blockchain, and that's we haven't seen that, right?
We haven't seen that. We haven't seen anything that's been done with any of these phases before. And so phase 3, we've already raised, I think, $200,000. It's been going on the last couple of days. And we're going to be, we're excited to give away all this ether to some of these great nonprofit organizations. And then we're going to give away Mainframe tokens to the people who donate the most.
Very exciting.
So as you can see in phase 1, phase 2, and 3, you can see there's a common thread, which is we're trying to give Mainframe tokens to the people who we think align with our values, our long-term vision of freedom, of privacy, that Mainframe is here to stay. Now, there's a lot of people that are bugged by this.
Yep.
The people that are like, we want to invest. Okay, well, they're not the right people. They're just not the right people for our community.
Sure. So you're breaking down some of the stigmas and the barriers of the whole point of essentially disruptive and distributed technologies. That is that you want to afford people access, and you are actually doing this in 3 phases by literally giving these away. And as you said, this is quite innovative and arguably hasn't been done at this scope. So congratulations for ensuring that many people have access. You are still going to have the backlash from those who are the hardcore or the die-hard traditionalists in this space. But once again, you have explained your position, so I do appreciate that.
It's impossible to make everybody happy.
Yes,
it's impossible in this space to make everybody happy.
Absolutely. Well, if we could talk now about your partnerships, I mean, you've alluded to some, and I thank you for that. But with regard to your investors, you have some serious venture capital firms involved. But what I wanted to talk about was not just those that are published, because that's old news. Tell us a bit about some of the enterprise connections that you do know about as the CEO, that you are forging, discussing with, and really building out the future of Mainframe.
Yeah, so these are partnerships. I can't break this news here because this is just too exciting, but I will give a few profiles.
Please do.
So one is a government in the Middle East that we're working with, and we have the green light for a pilot program. And essentially, they cannot trust Google or Microsoft or Facebook for their kind of internal communication. They need to control their own data, and they have their own team of engineers who build their applications specifically for their needs.
Right.
And basically the leader of kind of blockchain technology and kind of this government flew down to Mexico to watch us present at DevCon. This was 6 months ago or whatever, presenting at DevCon, because he was so excited about our technology. He just heard about what we were doing, and so he flew down, spent time with us, because essentially what they need something like Mainframe, which is decentralized. They need unstoppability. They need that resilience when there are people trying to attack or kind of compromise their communication. And they need control of their own data. And they need that flexibility to build and tweak their applications for their needs. Okay. So when you think about like the flexibility of the data of the applications, the control of their data, the resilience of a network, that added layer of privacy and security. Like, it's just a perfect fit for that government organization. So there's one example.
And Mick, thank you for really, alluding to that, because clearly if governments are involved, once again, this really does attest to the potential of this mainframe concept and company more so. So obviously you're excited about other governments onboarding or utilizing your system, and no doubt that will follow. But we certainly will be looking forward to getting updates formally from your news and media releases. So what about other enterprises in terms of, other connections you're talking to more locally? Yep. Obviously you're in Utah, so let's talk about the US even.
So I'll share one more example, one more use case. But again, I'm not going to give the name. But there's a well-known telco in Europe. Well, actually, I think they're worldwide, but they're in Europe. Okay. We were there meeting with them. Mm-hmm. For them, it's a big conglomerate. So they've got a lot of different subsidiaries. And, as a kind of telco, they also have customers, like business customers of their own.
Right.
And so they're interested in Mainframe for two reasons. One is their own internal communication, because they've got all of these different subsidiaries, all with different IT management and IT directors. And for them, it's like, wow, we could use Mainframe as a whole kind of enterprise. And no longer do we need to answer the question of like, whose IT are we going to be running on when they're cross collaborating, when they're working on initiatives together.
Because you're so interoperable.
It's decentralized, it's interoperable, there's no server, like it's a question of convenience. It's a question of like, wow, this is really easy to get up and running and we could all be using it.
Right.
And so just that convenience factor is really huge. And then the other thing is, they're thinking about building an application on Mainframe that then they can white label and package to resell to their own customers.
Okay.
Right? And they have that flexibility, right? It's open source, it's a network. They could build an application on Mainframe and resell it to their customers and their business customers and sell the same value propositions that we sell around privacy and security and all this stuff.
Well, clearly you're excited because these are just two examples of obviously the very bright future that you have with Mainframe. So would it be fair to say that this is a key element of your revenue generation and that this is how you reinvigorate the ecosystem as you move out? You replenish tokens via the revenue.
Yeah. I mean, listen, one of the things that amuses me about this space is we talk about everything, and I'm used to this at this point, and I say this as well. We talk about everything as projects.
Right.
Like there's some sort of like, weekend hackathon project.
Right. But you are a company.
We want to build a company. We want to build a sustainable, profitable company, a business with customers and revenue, right? And a team of people. Now, that's not to say we don't want to build a community. Of course we want to build a community. We need the community. We cannot do this without the community. But in terms of our team and the core developers, we want this to be sustainable. So we want a real company.
Right. And clearly, it's a community-driven company, and that's what is exciting about blockchain in itself. Now, let's further that, and a perfect segue in discussing, the elements of distribution and decentralization specifically as the new DD essentially for you. Just how important is it to you to have these two elements couple and synergize as you build out this ecosystem?
Just in terms of the community and the company, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. I mean, in the space, obviously, of other technologies that exist out there, particularly those that are already already centralized. Just how important is it to you, this premise of distribution and decentralization? How vital is it for your company?
It's essential. It's absolutely critical because the whole value proposition that we're communicating to our potential customers or developers who want to build on this on this platform is that it's decentralized and it's unstoppable. Now, it can only be really unstoppable if there are a lot of nodes that are participating on this network.
Right.
There needs to be a sufficient amount of nodes where dark routing is useful. If there's just like 3 nodes, dark routing is not going to do much good because like, okay, I just need to stop these 3 nodes. Sure. And so we need participants, right? We need people who are going to run nodes, who are incentivized to do that so that the network can be a strongly decentralized network. So that it can be more resilient, more unstoppable, and then it has that extra privacy and security. Because otherwise, if we don't have the community hosting nodes, then we lose all of that. It's hard to argue that it's private and secure.
And Mick, you've made it really clear the only way that they are incentivized to do so is to couple that with enterprise intentions and investment as well in your ecosystem. So it's a perfect sort of balance between the two, the user and the
the benefactor from business. So let's talk now about your use cases, again, a little bit more in specifics. Can you tell us exactly what kind of industries would utilize this first? You talked about potential use cases for your platform later, and more importantly, other applications. But let's get specific in terms of your experience, those already listening and engaging with you in industries right now.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about kind of government use cases where, they've got secrets. they've got confidential, secret, government classified information that they cannot have leak.
But who doesn't? What business doesn't?
Well, exactly. That's kind of what I was going to lead to. Is like you've got governments who have data that they need to keep secure, that they can't have leaked. You've got enterprises with the exact same needs. You've got pharmaceutical companies, financial institution companies. Obviously companies like big ISPs or telcos. You've got these. You think of like the Sony hack or the Yahoo hack. I mean, the number of enterprises that have information that are absolutely critical and sensitive is numberless, right? Let me give an example. There's a doctor who reached out to a physician. He works at Stanford Medical, and he's a fan of Mainframe and he's excited with what we're doing. And he basically said, Mainframe is the perfect use case to build a HIPAA-compliant communication tool for the medical industry, for their hospital. He works at Stanford Hospital, and he's like, they don't have any good tools to be able to communicate, to share patient records and patient data in a HIPAA-compliant way. And it's like that is a perfect use case. And so we're going to talk to him and we're going to try to figure out how we can get that going. He's an entrepreneur. I mean, he's a physician, but he's very entrepreneurial. And so that's a perfect use case. And we're seeing these use cases left and right. There was a dating app out of London, because we were there, and he heard about us and he was like, we want to make sure that when people are, communicating with each other, that it's secure, that it's private. Right. So a lot of these use cases are popping up left and right. It's really awesome. But
once again, you're the underlying trust for these interconnections and this communication. And that's what really does make you exciting, because there potentially is an infinite number of businesses with this kind of security interest that can utilize your service and benefit from you as they, come to understand what the blockchain can really do.
Exactly. Well, it's exciting.
It's very exciting, and I'm really sensing your excitement through the screen. So I'm
glad that you feel it. Yeah. I hope that it's contagious.
I'm feeling it.
I hope that you go away saying, you know what, I need to figure out how I can buy more Mainframe tokens at any
cost.
Well,
I can tell you I am trying to maintain my objectivity as much as I can, but certainly I'm feeling it through the screen. So now if we could talk about social media finally, and just if you could elaborate a bit more on how people can access the information, how they can interact with the community, how they can engage with you.
Yeah, so if you go to mainframe.com, there you can connect into our Telegram. We try to be really active. We try to engage, answer questions. Obviously, we've got our Twitter, Mainframe HQ, Mainframe_HQ is our Twitter handle. We try to engage, we try to connect, retweet, reply, etc. But you know what? I'm going to put my email out there. Email me, mick@mainframe.com. I want to hear from you. When we say we want to build community, we're not just pretending. We want to hear from you. We want to get your feedback. We want to understand what are your ideas for use cases for dApps. If you're a developer, what are the frustrations and needs that you have as you're thinking about building decentralized applications? Sure. Email me. I look forward to hearing.
Right, well, you heard it from Mick Hagen. He's literally putting his email where his mouth is, and he's telling you to communicate.
That's right.
To make sure that you are engaged as an active participant in this very exciting communications network. So some of the slogans, Mick, just to reframe this once again, no pun intended with Mainframe, is that you really do want to be this fully decentralized and unstoppable communications network. And most importantly, what I've learned from you today is that you're not just this network. You are actually really about ensuring that there are different tools in this toolbox. And some of them haven't even been designed yet, that it really could could afford people more of the benefits of the blockchain. So we really do thank you for bringing this in as the brick by brick. You are laying the foundation for really what is the essential layer for the new web, the decentralized communications network of the future. Is there anything you want to say to all the community, to finish off today?
Yeah, I would just say communication and messaging in the more generic sense is really just phase one, right? The bigger vision is to create a new layer of the internet, right? The existing internet, it changed the world. We love it. It's exciting.
Right.
We're creating a new layer of the internet where freedom and privacy are a first-class citizen for everybody and anyone all over the world, and where developers can build these rich decentralized applications with that censorship resistance and surveillance resistance built in from the get-go. And beyond just messaging, beyond communication, the network is about data packets moving around. So the possibilities are limitless.
Absolutely. Well, you've heard it from the CEO of Mainframe. This is Mick Hagen speaking. Thank you very much for your time on behalf of all those who genuinely have wanted to understand and really unpack what Mainframe is and plans to do. Hopefully we can connect later on and learn more about it and follow you as you emerge as arguably one of the main sort of companies that are really going to have a significant stake in the beginning phase of what is to be a very exciting time for blockchain and communication networks generally.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor. I'm a fan of the show. Feel free to invite me back anytime.
Absolutely, and thank you for your passion. We are excited that you are excited. Thank you very much for your time. It's Mick Hagen speaking on behalf of all of us. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
See you, mate.